Thank you. I really appreciate the introduction. Most people say I'm a leader. I'm not. I am a community activist. That's what I've done. I believe that you get involved in things where you want to make a difference, and I'm glad to see most of you are involved and are probably making a difference in whatever area you're working in. So that's good. With regard to the metropolitan charter that the mayor is proposing be developed. Consolidation is a good thing. I was on the last charter study commission. We had a countywide election of like 87 people who ran for 10 positions, and I was fortunate enough to be elected as one of the 10 to write the charter for consolidating the city and the county government. I had run on the assumption that Metro can be a good thing, a very positive thing for the advancement of the community as a whole. It can spur economic development and growth. It can in some ways eliminate graft and corruption in government. It's a reform movement. It's not going to save a lot of money as promised, because once they tax you, they don't give it back. They keep on taxing. But they will promise you that they will do it. So, but I lived in Nashville when Nashville began the process of consolidating Davidson County and the city of Nashville at that time. And I lived in Jacksonville for 10 years at the onset of that consolidation of Duval County and Jacksonville, Florida, into a consolidated metropolitan government. And I really enjoyed living in Florida under consolidation. It was a very representative government. It was large. They had a 19-member council. It was very open. They had a lot of citizen involvement on different boards. And I don't mean just top echelon citizens. I mean just everyday ordinary citizens could serve on boards. They had term limits on how long you could be in office. For 2 terms, not for life, for both the mayor and the city council people and other positions as well, the sheriff, the police chief, the judges, whatever the position it was, there was a limit on the time that they could serve, which meant that a lot of people get an opportunity to participate in the government, and that's a very positive thing. They had a civilian civil service system, where the council people appointed a civil service board that oversaw the whole civil service operation of the government. And that was a very positive thing, because people need, in a large government, workers need to be protected not only through union representatives but by the government itself, their employer. And that was done in Jacksonville to a large extent, and it worked very well, and it did spur economic development. Jacksonville's primary reason for consolidating was to eliminate graft and corruption. It was an old saying when I first got to Jacksonville: if you wanted to look for city government in the phone book, you looked under corruption, and you would find all the city elected officials listed there. In fact, my first year in Jacksonville was 1971, and there were like 9 council people commissioners and other city employees who were indicted and found guilty and was serving time, and more had already been indicted and convicted of crimes before I got to Jacksonville. So it was an ongoing thing for the first few years that I was there. That was the number one thing. Who's going to be indicted next was the thing. So Jacksonville had a real good reason just to get rid of the graft and corruption in city government and reform the government. What Metro government here is trying to do is not reform the government, but to reconfigure the government, or 2 governments. And if you know, there are roughly 13 cities in Hamilton County. 13. But only 1 city is being consolidated. And we're being consolidated, if that happens, with the unincorporated areas of Hamilton County. Now, So you would take the population of Chattanooga, if you want to get to where I'm going. You take the population of Chattanooga, the population of East Ridge and White Oak and Red Bank, Signal Mountain and Lookout Mountain, and all those other cities, and subtract it, you will probably come out with less than 30,000 people that will be consolidated with the city into a metropolitan form of government. Red Bank would keep its charter, East Ridge would keep its charter, Lookout Mountain would keep its charter, all the other cities would keep their charters. But it would only be the city of Chattanooga that would be giving up its charter. It would give up its right to ever exist again if it gave up that charter, because they just don't give out charters on a regular basis. In fact, they're taking in charters for even some counties here. We've lost counties in the last 20, 30 years here in Tennessee. So those are things that you have to really be serious about when you think about what you're doing. There are other things that you have to be concerned about. Representation is very, very critical. No matter the number, somebody has to get a pen and draw maps and create districts as to where they could be. And districts can be drawn in a way that it can weaken the power of individual groups, depending on where you're located. They can connect, for the lack of a better term, a minority group with a majority group, put them together, and the minority has no voice towards the election of a district representative. Or they could put together county residents in a large number with a few city people, and the county can have the superior numbers on a commission. And when you start looking at who has the value of numbers, is that those who are in the majority set the policy and the philosophy of the government and its attitude towards citizens, towards service to citizens, towards its employees and everything else. And if those districts are not drawn properly, you get that. Jacksonville saw the problem by having districts, but they also had 5 at-large positions. 14 district and 5 at-large positions. And those 5 at-large positions were grouped together, Group 1, Group 2, Group 3 through 5. And territory was divided as to where you could live to run for Group 5 and where you could live for Group 2 and 3 and so forth. And that way you had at least 5 of the council members who were elected at large from certain territories within the district, which was a fair way of doing it. And those 5 people generally had the cohesive glue that held the other 14 council members together, because they represented the whole city. They were elected at large. They didn't represent a district or a special interest group. The other 14 did. So those 5 generally was the glue that brought everybody together around issues and decisions that the government would have to make. The last charter that we wrote, I had proposed such a scheme, and it was accepted initially, but at the end of the charter it was rejected. It was sort of like what they're doing in Congress right now. We don't agree to anything until everything is agreed to. So they agreed early, and they agreed early on point by point, and when they get to the end, they said, now let's vote on what we agreed to. And so they took that out, and that was one of the reasons why I eventually opposed the charter, because it's the nuance. The devil of charter writing is in the details. How you draw the maps, how you align government in terms of its relationship to its employees, what groups are you excluding from participation, and what sensitivity do you have to those who are disadvantaged in any form or fashion, because the least of these is just as important as the others of us, if you will. So we opposed it. Now there were a group of Anglos primarily who opposed it because they were fearful of school integration. They thought that if you combined the two governments together, The city was under a court order to bus kids to achieve desegregation of the school system. The county was not, because the county primarily was an all-white system. The city was an integrated, multi-cultural system. So the county people were fearful, and that's why it lost in the county. Now that the city gave up its charter to operate its school system, I believe in 1998, 97, 98. And by doing so, the county had a responsibility to take over the city school system. It was not consolidating. It was just the city went out of the school business, and the next day the county had that responsibility by law. As you know, the city has its own charter, but the county does not have a charter at all, because the county is a subdivision of the state. It gets a lot of its funding for activities from the state.